And we're live. Don't be acting like you're tough. All right, I might be a minute late. Let me tell you about some BS. It is Akido. All right, I'll get to the bees here in a minute. So there's some martial arts out there that, I mean, it's a sport. I don't know how martial it is. Like, martial law is when the military takes over your town. And, there's a curfew. If you're out past the curfew, they shoot on sight. It's a war zone you're living in. That's what the martial arts are about. That's how you fight for your life to the last heartbeat. Aikido was designed, it's a Japanese form of self defense for when you've been disarmed. Someone's taken your samurai sword, or you left it at home, you're unprepared, or you got unhorsed, your ass got knocked off your horse in combat, your bow's broken, your sword, it's a yard sale, all your junk scattered on the ground. All of a sudden, you're surrounded by three enemy warriors with swords and knives and clubs. And it's not designed so that you actually can dominate. You're not going to be the cook, the Zen master cook on a naval vessel, and all of a sudden during a time of crisis you go around the whole ship and kick everybody's ass because you're a badass Aikido master. No, you know what Aikido's for? Aikido's the stuff they taught you. It's a last ditch effort. It's not even so that you can win a fight. It's so that you don't embarrass the general the last few seconds you're alive and just look like a pussy out there in the middle of the battlefield, just dying, going, "What do I do? I don't have a sword or a knife or a stick or nothing." At least you stand out there and stand up like a human being on your hind legs and die like a man on your feet. That's what Aikido is. It's a sport. You can stay in shape. You're like, you use a person's own momentum against them. Guess what? You can't make no fancy grabs and holds when they cut your hands off with a samurai sword. I'm just saying, okay, maybe you can poke them in the eyeball with your stump before you lose consciousness from blood loss. Keto, yeah. So how do I know about keto? I wouldn't say I'm an absolute expert on it, but I know enough to know this. I was taking Ieto, the art of the Japanese quick draw, whipping the sword out. Now, I'm not saying I got any particular good at that one. My buddy was. I mean, he was real good. I was just nervous because there was live sharp blades around all the time. I don't know that I ever learned anything. I was just busy trying not to get skewered. I mean, I done all right. You know, there are people walking around that had some bruises that I give them with bamboo swords. Shinai, they're called. Iajitsu, the art of the sword. Yeah. So anyway, back when I was all svelte. So, I hung around the dojo some, right? Well, it happened one day, of course. The sensei, I mean, he's not a bad guy, but he had a little bit of short man syndrome going on, and, he's a badass. But, the keto being what it is, he's like, yeah, you can take a larger man like this fella here. Can I use you for a tackling dummy for a second? Let me show these folks. I'm like, all right, I guess, sure. And we're teaching mostly kids at this point, right? And Aikido's, it's good if somebody grabs a hold of you, you can get out of their holds. I mean, it's pretty decent for some of that stuff. You can throw somebody off balance long enough, as long as they don't really know what they're doing as far as fighting goes. You can get somebody off balance, lose their momentum, and you can get away. I mean that's all right. Teach people how to do that is fine. But you're not gonna grab a hold of somebody that's a powerhouse monster, knows what they're doing, been in a few scraps, and has been down on the ground and been grounded and pounded before, and can swat a jet engine out of the midair like a Godzilla. I mean, that's not going to be effective. So I mean, he's showing some good techniques, and he shows people how to choke somebody out. And I mean, that's for real. But you know, some of this stuff is a little unrealistic. All about leverage and balance and center of mass, and yeah, it is. And there's some science there. If you get somebody's center of mass outside of their footprint, they've got to move their feet to regain their balance, or they're just going to fall over like a tree. Well, there's simple physics. But somebody knows what they're doing that's good on their feet, say a good boxer or you know a serious mixed martial artist, they'll be off balance. They'll take that half a step to regain their balance, and as soon as that foot hits the ground, they're turning and burning, and they're going to fire you up. They're going to hit you so hard in the kidneys that piss is going to fly out of your ears. So yeah, it's some self defense, but you're not going to empty out a ship full of terrorists with it. Bend some arms backwards, make some ugly faces, and $3 million at the box office on the first day it opens. No. So, he's showing stuff. Like this guy grabs a hold of you, you can spin around. Is he pushing you? Like, you grab a hold of his hand as he's pushing you, pull him off balance, trip him up, put him on the ground, stop him on the back of the head, whatever. Yeah, okay, that'll work. And then run away. Because what if you don't knock him out, like totally the hell out, the first shot, he's going to get up and be mad. Well, he's doing one of these things, and like, I didn't completely fly over the top of him. Oh, that's the other thing. He loved to throw me around. I was like 245 pounds, 6'2" and change. He's about 5'8", one. I mean, he wasn't tiny, 5'9" maybe, and 185, 190, pretty much solid muscle. And yeah, he had a lower center of gravity, so he'd get things going right. He'd drop to a knee, put his shoulder like into my chest or in my belly, flip me over like tossing a grilled cheese sandwich in the frying pan, man. I mean, sure. I mean, and yeah, it works even better if you're really big. You know, you get somebody that's overweight like I am now, like 320 pounds. I mean, yeah, sure. Problem is, what if that guy already has a foundation set up pretty well? Like maybe he's down on one knee and you try and wrestle him over onto if his center of gravity is equal with yours, you might have a problem because he's got inertia. So he was trying something. I don't know exactly how we got where we got because it became a blur after that. He had like a half Nelson headlock on me, and he was trying to throw me. He dropped to one knee. I was almost down on one knee, and then he like grabbed a hold of my crotch like he's going to flip me over, right? Well, I got to tell you something. You grab a hold of another man's junk, it's on. I don't know exactly what I did, but when he had a hold of my balls, I went, he's laying in a pile. I don't know what I did. I need him in the head. I mean, I like something in my animal brain, the switch got flipped. That was the end of the Aikido lesson that evening. He's laying there on the ground going, "Oh." I don't know. I don't know what I did, but it happened like now. And I'm not particularly that good. I mean, if he came across a Brock Lesnar or something, he'd been laying there broken half, bleeding out his eyeballs or something. Fedor. I mean, Fedor might have opened up his body cavity and started eating his liver. I mean, he could have been in big trouble. So yeah, Aikido. Look, not everything is gonna work. That's why uh, Like throughout the Middle Ages, everybody had a big knife on them, a dagger. Like even little old ladies had a foot long, a dagger with a foot long blade. That's why the wrestling matches were to the throw, actually. Um, it wasn't about pinning somebody, because basically you got somebody off their feet and on the ground. You got a big dagger. You just go poke, 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 poke. They got some extra orifices to let out all the magical blood juice, and it's game over. Weapons are equalizers. I'm not even going to talk about when black powder showed up and firearms became a thing. Yeah, a flintlock musket or pistol, smooth bore might not be the most accurate, reliable, but it's the best tool in town when you get in trouble. And if trouble's your business, you make sure that that firearm is reliable. You like on the flash pan, you put like some beef tallow around it so that it's more or less waterproof when it's closed. You sharpen the flint, that little bit of rock that fires the spark off into the pan of black powder. I mean, you do your homework. Even then, when we talk about keeping something under your hat, let me give you an idea. So they used to have these guns called matchlocks, and a match is just another word for a fuse, slow burning bit of. Well, this is fuse. This is insulation off a wire, but it will serve as a prop. Let me get one of my military type army hats and show you this. So you got a hat, right? This fuse works best when it's dry. So what you do is you have yourself a roll of fuse that you carry on you. This is your backup. You got your spare that stays lit, or somebody around you has something that's lit, or there's a fire going. There's always a fire going. It's an army camp. So what you do is you keep that under your hat so it stays dry. It just sits there all the time, ready to go. So keeping something under your hat means. So they were prepared to make things as reliable as humanly possible, so that they had a better chance of not dying when the chips were down. When things get real. It's raining, sleet and snow and whatever. Keeping that keeping your powder dry is good, obviously. Keeping that fuse dry is just as good. So it was kind of like a punky amadou. Uh, it was a fungus mushroom. Paul Stamets talks about this. So it wasn't like a cannon fuse. They would take this fibrous mushroom that grows on birch trees and whatever else in Europe, and it would just smolder with a red hot coal. You could always blow on it, and it would flare back up. You use that to touch off the pan of powder. A matchlock is just like an open hole in the side of the barrel, a little pan that has a little extra powder in it. That's your flash in the pan. You hear that one? Woof, and then boom. Those are much harder to aim. Uh, get the timing is difficult, and you're messing around with your match, your little bit of punk. You're touching off to the hole, so you're trying to hold it, aim it, and set her off. So a lot of times you're not even looking over the barrel. A lot of them don't even have sights. You just kind of point in the general direction of the enemy and go, foof, boom. when flintlocks came out. Now that was some technology. Well, that was around for a long time. Still, quite a bit of firearms enthusiasts that use flintlocks do some really neat stuff. It'll never be as reliable as a closed cartridge firearm, good old 30-06 or one of the new fancy ones, AR-15, new being 60 years old, AR-15. Or how about the 45, John Moses Browning? He was an interesting fella, Ogden, Utah, like a genius. But yeah, that 45 was put up for trials 1911, went into service then, and there are still some special forces that prefer that firearm because it's robust. The old timers used to say, and everybody got real hot and bothered about 9 millimeters in the 80s. The Lethal Weapon showed Mel Gibson just plowing round after round into the bad guys. The 9 millimeter. That's great and all, but all the old timers are like, yeah, well, a 9 millimeter might expand upon impact, but a 45 don't shrink. Like it starts out pretty big. That hydrostatic shock thing is a killer. So yeah, know your weapon is what I'm getting at. Is that martial arts are just a tool in the toolbox. The whole thing is you're trying to survive when another bad person is trying to do something bad to you. You just want to get away from all the bad people and get to the good people that you love and adore that take care of you and you take care of them. Your goal is to survive and get away from those people and live a good life. Fight or flight or freeze. Well, you don't want to freeze. And honestly, most of the time, if you can do the flight thing and not do the fight thing, that's the way to go. Look for the exit and hit the dough. If you have to fight just long enough to get out of somebody's short range grip and leave. Beat feet, stand around and prove you're better, stronger, faster. No, because it don't always work out that way. That ain't always the way it is. Sometimes you cannot win against one of those people, and sometimes there's 4 or 5 of them. So, discretion's a better part of valor. Move, son. Leg it. Yeah, this may not be the proudest part of your hero's journey, but it might be the smartest thing you've done today. Get rolling. What I'm saying. So one of my missions is to make this hat right here become like the most uncool thing ever. I wear it like a size or two too small. Matter of fact, I think I'll crank her down another size. What do you think? Make it look like a car in a circus where you have the guy in the gorilla suit wearing children's clothing, driving a little miniature car. The Shriners, they do that kind of thing. Oh man, put my phone on silent. There we go. See what that text was. So phone, the bees, right? Some people got it bad. Dude's like, bro, you gotta have me on your podcast one day. It'll be so fun. You thought of a name for it yet? I've had a name for 3 months, you goofball. It's called T Modcast. I didn't come up with it though. It's on the playlist. Pay attention. There'll be a test later. This is a little uncomfortable like that. See a ring around my forehead. Jam down it. Squeezing a bunch of pride of my brain. Let's go back to a human sizing regimen, shall we? All right. I wear a hat because of this unsightly glare off of my scalp and 5 head. If you can put 4 fingers above your eyeballs before the hairline, it's a 5 head, not a 4 head. Mine might be a 6 1/4. I got the kind of pate on the top of my head blasted. Another gnat. I got the kind of shine on my pate that if I'm out hunting and I decide in the afternoon to take a nap in the meadow, my hat falls off. The glare off of my head might start a forest fire if the sun angle's right. Someone said, well, why don't you just keep the beard and shave your head? Man, my head is so ugly. I mean, not just the part you can see up front here, the face. I got like arrow wounds. I got like places where the horns have been filed off. I got bumps and lines and scars and just thickened areas of callous bone from repeated impacts. If I shaved my head, I look like a Klingon that had a bad day. Shout out. Shout out to my buddy. Oh, the Marine with multiple bachelor degrees and masters. Old Tempest. You gotta love him. It's really funny. He's real mild mannered, you know. He is not the kind of guy that brags. But when he gets on it, I mean, when he gets mad, he makes Bruce Lee look like a hobo. I mean, he's just. He does a thing like that's another thing why the Aikido didn't work on everybody. Chokeholds too. So like he gets mad. He doesn't have nearly as much going on as me, but I mean my neck is pretty thick. I don't know if you noticed. But when he gets mad, like the tendons and veins pop out on his neck, and like his sternocleidomastoid. He makes this claw. Like, he used to be a stockbroker with me. He was on the desk next to me. There's a little pushing match kind of scuffle broke out behind him between one of the managers and one of the other brokers. And they bumped into him while he was on the phone. He dropped the phone, spun around, and says, "Any one of you bitches touches me, I'll rip out your throat, sit down your throat, sit down your neck, rip your head off." I mean, he just he turned into demon devil dog marine right in front of your eyes. Like he's in a sharp suit. He's looking all clean, suave, domesticated, civilized. You know, he's a nice guy, says good morning to the ladies. Somebody just bumps into the back of his chair while he's standing next to it, and he goes, "Primal." talking a room full of guys that talk for a living to make their money. They make their money with the sounds that come out of their face. You could have heard a pin drop. Everybody was like, "Whoa," and they're like, think Neil's going to kill somebody and eat their liver through their rib cage. He wasn't even mad yet. That was just like a warning shot, just so everybody knows where we stand here. If there's any doubt as to who the top predator in the pyramid in this food chain here in this room is, it's Tempest. Just so you know. And that fat gorilla looking grizzly bear over there that like oozes testosterone through his skin. He's got my back. I'm like, hey, whatever Neil wants, man. He's my boy. He's my ride to work and everything, man. I'm not gonna say a word bad about it. If he needs help, I'm gonna help him. I don't know what everybody else is doing. I know Neil's good to go. Like, oh, you like Neil that much? I'm like, well, I'm not sure how much I like the guy. I mean, I love him and all. I just don't want to get hit. Like, I'm a pretty good judge of somebody's physical, mental capacities as far as fighting abilities and determination, and the heart of the fighter. The fight in the dog, not just the dog in the fight. Like, I'm taller than him, I'm thicker than him. Yeah, I'm fatter, but I'm stronger. I can pick him up. Him picking me up might not be just quite so easy. Do it, but the chances of him pushing on me pushing on him, and him knocking me off balance are slim. But I could try choking him out for about 5 minutes, and even though he couldn't breathe, he'd be like eviscerating me with his stored up last bit of energy with his sharp elbow. I mean, he'd be like 38 times a second. There's no reverse on that engine right there. Like, he doesn't get in bar fights. He starts and ends wars. There are no scuffles and skirmishes where he's at. He charges full bore in and let the bodies hit the floor. So yeah, I don't know what all kind of martial arts training he has. It doesn't matter because he wants to kill everybody. That's just how his DNA is put together. We're just fortunate he found a civilized occupation. He reminds me of. He reminds me of Robert Redford as Jeremiah Johnson. I mean, he's the kind of guy that he would he would hunker down for 3 days in a snowbank with a flintlock rifle, not even sure his thing's going to fire when he needs it, just waiting on the guy that killed his wife and kid on the off chance that he could jump out. He don't want to shoot him. He wants to jump out and club him to death because he killed his woman. It's on. Like, John Wick ain't got nothing on that guy. You killed my puppy. Yeah, that's awful. That's terrible. I mean, that'll tear your heart up. But you killed my wife and kid. I might never eat nothing again but raw meat and human flesh from here on out because I'm going to get your asses, every one of y'all. I mean, it would be on. Epic. Like, his story is going to be told word of mouth, generation to generation in the Blackfeet tribe forever. Like after a while, they came to him and said, "Please, can we make you a brother? Let's make you a blood brother because you're going to wipe our tribe out. Like our number one breeders are dead because you wiped them out." It has no such thing to do with any sort of racial inferior or superiority or ubermensch or nothing like that. Not at all. You messed with a man's family. You killed his wife and kid. You broke into his home while he was out providing for his family. You broke into his home and killed his family, took all of his earthly possessions except for his rifle and the clothes on his back and the moccasins on his feet. So every minute of every day, every heartbeat for the rest of his life is dedicated to killing every single one of you. And if he's got to chew on jerky and eat snow for 4 days so he can surprise you when you finally walk through this gap in the rocks, that's what he's going to do. And he did it over and over and over. Like some people think he killed as many as 60 Blackfeet in the clan that killed his wife and kid. I mean, this guy killed more people than smallpox. His nickname was Liver Eating Johnson. Like the movie went soft on portraying this guy because he was a cannibal. He didn't really eat people. What he did was he freaked out. So they have a body worship kind of religion for the afterlife. Like their idea is that you would like to have your body as whole as possible. They don't cremate their dead. They um, in the afterlife they want you to go into the afterlife with more or less a whole body. I mean, if you've got a wound or something, that's fine. But like your legs chopped off, your eyes, you know, bludgeon out, or your scalp taken off. I mean, that's not good. That's one less tool you have in the afterlife to be a warrior with, or to be a hunter with, or whatever. So he would, after he'd kill somebody, he'd split them open and cut out a hunk of their liver. I mean, that is, you know, old school primal. He didn't do that because he was some bloodthirsty, crazy freak. He did that because he knew that it would freak them out of because of what they believed. So he was doing psyops on top of being, the badass that would, eat, sleep, and stay in the snow for 3 days in a snowbank, stand like a statue, and then he'd come out of nowhere like a yeti and just destroy somebody. Yeah, that guy. That's martial arts. That's whatever it takes to win the battle, to stay alive, and to make sure the other guy's incapacitated. That's what martial arts are. Everything else is just window dressing. They're having fun upstairs tonight. Saturday night in a little college town. If you're here, there's not much to do, especially when they're threatening another snowmageddon, polar vortex apocalypse, whatever. So far, I mean, it's been unpleasant. It's been cold rain with a little bit of sleet mixed in. I mean, you don't want to be standing outside. I don't care what you're dressed in. It's that kind of cold that's damp and oh, like your bones go ugh, not good. So, cell phones, huh? Some people got it bad. I mean, a guy like that shouldn't be allowed in public, right? I know, right? He says, "That's way funny, brother." Thanks, man. So Al Gore floated this uh, theory or this hypothesis that he would like to have been a theory. It started out on his book back in 1992 called Earth in the Balance Ecology and the Human Spirit by Albert Gore. It's not that he really thought this way, it's that he was working political leverage. He became the first green billionaire flying around the world, increased his carbon footprint a hundredfold. Now, in theory, you can increase your own carbon footprint, increase awareness around the world, convince other people to produce less carbon, and their reduction in carbon footprint more than makes up for your increase in carbon footprint. But now we're talking about social engineering calculus, not necessarily fixing the environment. Whatever. I'm telling you that wasn't his goal. And what does bees and cell phones and Al Gore and the climate change and Earth in the balance have anything to do with each other? Martial arts and what I'm saying is they're throwing out the wrong tool from the toolbox to get something done when they have proof that it's a wrong tool. So Al Gore was in the pocket of the chemical companies already as a senator in 1992. See, he was talking about bee colony collapse and saying it was the fault of the cell phones. Well, I mean, if you lay out a theory like that, you better have some good scientific data already peer reviewed in the can, showing, you know, some validity to your thought process here. Or you better know some scientists really close enough, personal like, that have this are ready to release it just any day now. They're just collating all the data and getting everything pretty up for public consumption. Like you need to know the raw data is there and reliable and repeatable before you lay out a whopper like bees are imploding from the radiation of cell phone towers. I'm not saying he's completely wrong. That's not the point. Okay, there may be some electromagnetic uh, shenanigans going on that's not being reported. I don't doubt it whatsoever. And are bees sensitive to electromagnetic fields? Absolutely. There's also the argument. Okay, so here's a flower with some pollen in it. All right. So bees see into the ultraviolet. The landing pad of if you get the chance, look at a flower in the UV spectrum. That flower looks different in UV because they're attracting bees as part of their job with these flowers. The bright colors, the smell, you know, basically pheromone producing or simulating. And in the UV spectrum, so the bees can see the color that we see, they also see on up into the UV spectrum, ultraviolet, above violet. And it, like some of these look like targets you can see from space. I mean, they're just amazing, some of these flowers. So the bees can't miss them. They just can't. And then there's this electromagnetic field. So what happens is when uh, a bee lands on this flower, the pollen is charged one way, and a bee flying in the air produces an electromagnetic charge themselves. So when this bee that is charged lands on the plant that's charged, there's a discharge that goes on, and that's why the pollen sticks so well to the bee's body. Then it flies again, goes back to the nest. As soon as it lands at the uh, back at the colony, the bee nest, the beehive, it lands. That charge gets neutralized again. All that pollen falls off real easy. They don't even have to clean themselves. It's like a self-eject system. They just drop off their cargo as soon as they hit the. You'll actually notice them. They'll circle around so that they land in the right spot, so that their cargo pollen is deposited in the right way. So they have a sense of electromagnetic fields as part of their foraging behavior. because a flower that was just visited by another bee and had all its nectar drained out and all of its pollen gathered up, when that bee lands, that field has been collapsed, and now the fields around the flower is built up back again as the production continues, nectar and pollen and what have you. That magnetic field gets stronger based over time since the last time it was visited by a bee. So a bee will fly by a flower that's already been drained of its nectar to one that hasn't been touched in 5 hours or a full 24 hours, a whole day or whatever. So they can definitely sense electromagnetic fields. The one part of the theory is where some of this falls apart is they can sense electromagnetic fields from a long way away. So if you've got a cell phone tower putting out this field, well, the bees are going to fly around it. I mean, they can feel it a mile away, and they're going to go, well, they're just going to go around it. They know it's there. We also know that they can overcome electromagnetic fields if they want to do something really bad enough. If they, um, for example, bug zappers. Okay, just about every flying insect, to some degree or another, has pretty good detectors for electromagnetic fields. But bug zappers still work very efficiently because the draw of a moth or a mosquito coming in to that light of the bug zapper, that ultraviolet violet fluorescent light, that beacon putting out a little bit of infrared, etc. That light, that moth and that mosquito are just drawn into it, just psychomotive death charge into that light, and they fly through a very strong magnetic field. You got your little shocker wires here. Well, they built up a charge, magnetic field around them like a big capacitor. Well, they fly right past that field and get zapped. They catch on fire. Some of them sit there and they create an arc. It's like a Jacob's ladder that goes up that field. And the magnetic field produced by that arc is enormous. And while they're there burning off the Jacob's ladder going, there's 8 more bugs that slam into the bug zapper with the magnetic field like 80 times bigger than it is normally at rest. So we already know about how bugs will go around magnetic fields and through them and under them and do all sorts of things. Like they know they're there, but it's not an absolute deterrent against anything. So, having said all that, no science to back up any theory at that time in '92 or again when he writes his Inconvenient Truth book. It's inconvenient for the wrong lobbyists. So, what was causing colony collapse? We had 4 really good scientifically backed studies on how things were going for the bees. We knew why. We were just trying to change things around so things weren't so deadly. We had pesticides and herbicides that were poisoning the bees, right? Roundup and every kind of pesticide known to man. Some of them are akin to nerve gas. Like the difference between them is just the, the degree of concentration. Some are just watered down a little more. The difference between some of those pesticides and like VX, sarin, tubin, phosgene gas, or just between that and the pesticides they're putting out to kill the grasshoppers. It's the same chemical. They just diluted it with a little soapy water and sprayed it from an airplane. Like, oh, what a great idea. Let's just spray this whole area, shall we? Yeah, what a great idea. Factory farming. That's the answer. That's what was killing the bees. So then you got pesticide. Then you got parasites. There's this neat little fly that would infect a larva, and some larva that was prey food for ants and bees. And this larva they would go out and collect, the ants would go out and collect the prey food, and um, like they did this stuff like milking aphids, and bees will actually drink the fluid, the just like nectar. They will consume the sugary substance exuded by other animals. Like they're not, like, you wouldn't exactly call them vegan. Like they eat animal products as well as plant nectar, but that's another story. So they also suck up some stuff from mushrooms. Now that can get interesting. And mushrooms attract them on purpose as well and have UV luminescent stuff going on. That's neat. So there's these parasites that can live in that fluid and go into the colony and collapse the colony from within. They, these little protozoa parasites can get inside the larva, and then there are these little botfly type parasites that they mimic the pheromones of the bees so that their larvae smell just like the baby bees smell. So they case up a predator in the middle of a million meals around it in the honeycomb. So here's here's a botfly, and it's a predator that eats every other kind of bee larva. It hatches in, whenever it hatches like a day ahead of all the other larvae around it. It just starts eating all the other larvae. I'm gonna eat your children. Yeah. So that'll cause a colony to collapse. So we knew about that one. The other one is simply just factory farming, where they would take a huge percentage of, not just in this country, but in America, the prominent example is the pollination of the almond crop in California. So at least once a year, you load up all your beehives, these multiple colonies. Like a lot of times you spread out your colonies in different places. A lot of them will be a mile or two apart. Like you'll have a bunch on your farm, quote unquote. But then a mile or so down the road, you have some placed on the edge of this park, on the edge of the National Forest Reserve. Like you place them around in different areas. You get different kinds of honey. You develop different kinds of bee colonies, for that matter. I mean, you can actually even get subspeciation that way, but that's another story. You have like cultivars of different kinds of honey. There's all kinds of nuances to it. Well, then but farming is tough business. The margins are slim. So if you've got cash in a box. If you've got these millions of honeybees, so you load these boxes of honeybees up on a flatbed truck, and then you go to California to pollinate the almond crop. The problem is you get paid cash for it. I mean, it's good money, but on the drive out there, you're stressing out your bees. You'll lose 5 to 10% on the way out there. Now it's good eating while they're out there, so your colony recovers. But you and every other farmer in the continental North America, including from Canada, Alaska, on down to Mexico, are driving your honeybees into California. It's a giant cesspool of virology, bacteria. One guy said it's like the world's largest insect whorehouse. I forget the number. It's something insane, like 20 billion bees or something was in this one location for a month. And they're all swapping spit, I mean, it's just ugly. So you go down here, you've got your colony is immune compromised when it gets there. Then you throw it into a cesspool, And then after a month of making sure that everybody got everything that every other diseased insect has in the region, you load them all back up on the truck and then you drive for 30 hours back to home, stress them all out again, lose 10% of your population again, and then send them back out on the farm and hope they recover. And now, if you're hurting for money, you don't just do that at the almond crop. And you go down, you go to, Farmer Boudin's peach crop in Louisiana and Texas. You go, you go down from Wisconsin to the Texas swamp area where they're growing peaches, and you unloose your bee NATO into the Louisiana swamplands, and they bring home some southern parasites that they're not used to because they were raised in Wisconsin. Yeah, so we had some good ideas to where bee colony collapse syndrome was happening, and there was real science studying it already. And just somewhere out of left field, well, it's pretty easy to figure out. All right, now you know Al Gore, slow walking, slow talking Tennessee fella, but he was raised in Washington D.C. He's the senator's son. He's Al Gore Sr.'s son. He's the senator's son that Creedence Clearwater Revival talks about in 1969. That's who that kid is. He went to Vietnam. Oh yeah, he had armed bodyguards on both of his shoulders and in front and behind him whenever he was in Vietnam. He saw action from 1,000 yards away in a helicopter with Marines and Navy SEALs guarding his ass. I fought the war. Yeah, okay. Did you ever get your boots muddy? Yeah, whatever. So, hey, maybe he is a hero. I don't know. I wasn't there, allegedly. So, well, he's already got Monsanto and DuPont and General Dynamics and all these other folks in his pocket as a senator. So he's not going to badmouth the pesticides. They're already paying up. So he's not going to kick the cow he's already getting milk from. Okay. But he doesn't have the cell phone providers under his thumb. So they're just one on the list. And this is just one theory. Now, I'm not saying that all of what he espouses is BS. Climate science is established science. This there's no doubt we as human beings are drastically affecting the climate. No doubt. However, I don't think we're microwaving and imploding bees like some sort of bizarre anti-species Star Wars strategic defense initiative, zapping them out of the sky with killer death rays from our cell phones. We're not walking around going pew 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 pew, killing the bees. No, we're doing it the way we kill everything else. We're poisoning the air, the water, the land, and then the ones that survive, we're forcing them into factory farming, something they were never designed for. We're forcing 20 years of production out of them in one season in the spring or fall. Yeah, I wonder why they're dying in droves. Yeah. It's the same old reason. We're playing robber barons with the critters. That's why they're dying. Because you've got this guy that he's trying to pay the taxes off from when his old man died. He still owes money from the death taxes he's paying from inheriting the property. He owes a third of the value of the property after penalties and interest. And that's before he even pays for his expenses to run the farm. Like he still owes $45,000 in penalties. And he's been running his farm for 10, 12 years after the old man kicked the bucket. The old man had crap for insurance, and they spent $85,000 trying to make him comfortable while he was dying the last 2 years of his life. And we'll just worry about the farm whenever the old man kicks the bucket. We love this guy. He's done everything for the community anybody could possibly do. That's 85 grand after everybody volunteered their time and resources to help this family out. Because that's the state America's in. We've got all kinds of shit problems in every demographic, in the cities, in the rural areas, in the ditches. We have people living in their cars because they can't afford an apartment on the suburbs of town, let alone downtown. But they got to work a job. There's no job in their little hometown. They can live in their hometown off of what they make, but they can't afford to commute back and forth 104 miles a day. The public transportation doesn't exist at all. So they've got this piece of crap car they're living in 5 days a week. They stay on the weekends and Fridays and Monday at their cousin's house, so they have a decent place to shower and some place to wash their clothes. This is a life that some Americans are living. They're not on the unemployment rolls because they're busting their ass to survive. They're not technically unemployed. They're not even under the poverty line because if you measure their wage, they're making like $54,000 a year, but they make that money. They're making double the poverty line, but they can't afford to live anywhere that's not mobile. They have to make a choice between driving to work, having a job, or having a house. They can't have both. That's what we're living in. So you take those people, and then he's got a second responsibility of trying to save the land, the precious farm that his granddad wretched out of the ground with his own hands, or maybe his great great grandparents. Oh, yeah, and grandmama works real hard too. She might work harder than grandpap. It's just nobody ever hears about it. That's the other thing. We should let some of the women folks that have been in the background come to the foreground and run a few things because they've got a clue too, and they're probably going to take care of people that need help. So I guess I got off on a tangent with Al and the Bees, but that's how it goes. So we travel on this journey, and then they make a movie about it. I've got my buddy who's, he's a nice guy, and he's telling me about these bees and the cell phone. I'm like, man, Barrett, I hear what you're saying, man, but I gotta see a little bit of science. I'm just not gonna take this on pure faith alone. Now. I mean, like I'm kind of letting him down easy because pretty much this is like, you know, this is pie in the sky pseudoscience. Like all the in his book and his movie, the climate change science is well documented, peer reviewed. I mean, we've got real data going back hundreds of thousands of years out of the ice cores. Like we know what the climate has done in a lot of ways. We don't know everything, but we know a lot about what kind of temperature and air composition the climate has been for a long time, like a couple 100,000 years. We know about contaminants. We know about composition of nitrogen, carbon dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, oxygen, obviously, all sorts of fantastic information. All that science is sound. And then he drops in four or five little stories here in the middle that are just complete, utter bonkers. And it's not about pseudoscience even. But let's just stay on that for a minute. This is what I'm getting about martial arts. Like this stuff is gets to be life and death taken seriously. And you get in the middle of that and you can get your clock cleaned because the real science comes along. We're like, maybe there's a little bit of influence there, like a tenth of 1% somewhere along the way. But like, these animals are strong. We've proven it because we've been beating them and twisting them for millennia. Uh, some electromagnetic fields are not going to stop them from procreating and thriving. It's not high on the list unless it gets to the point where we're literally bursting them with microwave death rays out of the air. Like you ramp up the milliamps to amps where you're not. It's not a microwave signal; it's a microwave oven. Then yeah, okay, you're going to be blowing up some bees. But let's back up here. This is the Aikido of agricultural science. Like there might be some little tiny niche part of the world where this is somewhat true and will work for you. But for the vast majority of things, the things that are killing the bees are good old fashioned nerve gas pesticides. You know, VX, sarin, organophosphates. You know, the kind of stuff that'll melt your lungs and turn your spinal column into goop and your eyeballs fall out of your head. That wonderful stuff that we invented starting in about 1936 or so. And mustard and phosgene gas were before that. Then there was good old chlorine, just pure old elemental death. It's mighty active and will bond with everything and everybody. It's not fun. Yeah, so let's go with that. Like, that's probably important. I mean, we're aerial gassing every square millimeter of the United States, Canada, half of Mexico, Europe, India, China, Korea. Yeah, you think maybe like, some of the healthiest bee populations were in Australia there for a while just because they couldn't get everywhere to nuke the atmosphere with pesticides because the outback is brutal. Same story in Africa. One of the reasons why those Africanized bees are so powerful is we had to poison them back to the Stone Age. You can't get to them out there. Like, mechanisms break down in 140-degree Serengeti heat, sub Saharan Africa. Oh my God. Yeah. Like, cute little biplane running a rotary gasoline powered carbureted engine. You throw a handful of sand at that thing at 140 miles an hour, and it goes, and gravity takes over. Very low, unstable orbit. You look like one of them bees that got nuked by a microwave death beam. Your wings fold up. Your drag is significantly higher than your lift capacity for maintaining flight is no longer viable. You make this noise like they call it arguing in. That's when you spin around so fast that you hit the ground and spin in deeper. You don't just crash, you drill into the earth. One of those kind of crashes. Like they just look for parts of the plane. They don't even look for parts of people at that point. They just want to make sure they can identify which plane they had that disintegrated as it tried to take on the whole planet in a kinetic meaning. That's a bad day to be flying an airplane. You get one of those haboob sandstorms that picks up. You're not even in the desert. You're like 80 miles out of the desert. All of a sudden, this 130-mile-an-hour wind with temperatures in the 130 Fahrenheit range blows this sand 12 miles high out of the desert onto the part that's not desert. That's the farmland. You're trying to dust with some pesticide to kill some grasshoppers. Believe me, those grasshoppers stop being a priority when there's a 12-mile high wall of sand coming at you at 75 miles an hour. Your flight potential is very important at that juncture in time and space. The old saying is every takeoff is optional, every landing is mandatory. That plane will come back to the earth. You just hope you have some control on its descent. So, yeah, the bees. Oh, absolutely, save the bees. Oh, no doubt. That is big. So, so basically, he's he's leaning in and saying, "All right, now look, I want you I want your T-Mobiles and AT&Ts and Lucid Technologies and Qualcomm. I want you all to listen up here. Firing a shot across your bow. Y'all better hire the lobbyists and pay up and put the money in our pockets over here in the Senate, or we will investigate you with a Chinese inspection and crawl up every orifice with a microscope until we prove what we want to prove. So, you want our protection racket? You got it." And that's how it kind of runs, man. They run a protection racket on companies and industry. Not like the companies and industries are, you know, harmless in the deal. You know, they they work the system. They play the game. They get high enough on the food chain to where they're like Exxon Mobil. Back in 2002, Exxon Mobil paid less than 2% of their gross profit in taxes. And that's like, wow, man, they got away with something. No, they didn't get away with something. Like that's the last year they paid taxes. Ever since then, they've gotten a tax break. In other words, they got cash back like a discovery card. Like they didn't just get tax breaks right off on their taxes where they don't have to pay as much in tax. They're like 2%. That's outrageous. We need to get rid of that. We need to make sure we make money on taxes. Like they get money back. They don't get a tax refund because they pay too much in taxes and they get some of their own money back at the end of the year. No, they get some of my money, some of your money back at the start of the year. Like they're spending our money before we get it to give to them. I mean, this is how twisted. Oh, yeah. And that's the deal. That's the way the world runs. Like it's not pay to play. It's pay until you can't pay anymore, and maybe you'll get a chance to play someday if you know the right connections and you're a big enough fish in the pond. Maybe they'll let you play in the river. I mean, it is brutal. And like there are things I won't tell you about that I know for fact. I've seen documentation, like real, like company memo stuff. When I was a stockbroker, some of the stuff, I mean, one of the reasons why I became disillusioned with the job, you see these great companies doing great things and making the world a better place and cleaning up the planet while they're doing it, while they're kicking butt, making jack. I mean, making it easier for people to have an affordable place to live and make a living wage. And those companies just get squashed by the market on purpose. We're like, we can't have any of this hippy dippy horse shit. We need some good old Texas kick them in the ass and make them shit themselves and roll around on the floor while we robber baron all the resources in the area. Unask my LZ there, Skipper. This is my business field. You're getting all touchy feely with my money. And so they grab 37 lobbyists and throw it at Congress. They spend $18 billion. They spend more than the entire output of this little up and coming company that's just kicking ass and taking names. Has a 40% return on investment, 18% return on assets, and then they lose $7 billion in a quarter. They weren't worth $7 billion in total revenue the year before that. And these guys go and they set them up on a big contract. All right. Let them win the contract and then pull it out from under them and then sue them. I mean, just gutted the company. It's like it exploded from the inside out. I mean, there were people that lost personal fortunes that started the company that had it made in the shade, had $30 million cash in assets that blew it all on one lawsuit. They did nothing wrong except they were good at what they were doing and they didn't have enough lawyers on staff. That's the financial world we live in. That's the business world we live in. That's the political world we live in. You have politicians saying, "What's in it for me?" Because my job as a politician is I'm a fundraiser. My job isn't to pass law or stop law from being passed or make the world a better place or lower the taxes or raise the taxes or raise the standard of living or fight for a living wage or fight for better unemployment benefits or uh, make sure our babies are well fed and have their vitamins and get their vegetables and fiber and grow up strong and have decent education and have half a shot at being a fine, intelligent human being with some compassion in their soul. No, their job as a senator, a congressman, a politician is they're running in the next election, and that takes cash, hard money. Then with Citizens United, we made it a free for all love shack convention, like those billions of bees pollinating in the in the almond trees in California. It's just a big old whorehouse cesspool, and everybody's just trying to grab all the money they can while the getting's good. And next month, we're taking a show on the road. We're coming to your town. We're going to suck your town dry of money too, because you want a piece of the power pie, baby. And to do that, you got to spend the money. You got to get the jack. You want your little niece and nephew to have health care. Well, you better buy the right politician because America's for sale and it's all on the auction block 24/7. They're raising funds. This isn't fun and games. This is fundraising. That's what it's all about. Nancy Pelosi gets back in power because she's a good fundraiser. They don't like that person any more than they like any other politician. She's a good fundraiser. Same thing with Mitch McConnell. He stirs people up and they drop money like pennies at a prom. I mean, it goes on and they're all the same. You Everybody fights over their differences. It's not us and them, man. Politicians, their job is to raise money. Fundraising is the job. The job is not making speeches. The job is not sticking it to the other side because they're crazy, because they don't know what they're talking about, because they're going to ruin this country. No, their job is to raise money. Their job is to go out here and be robber barons and sticking it to us. They rob our money from us before we pay taxes on it. Then they rob us again. And then they give it away to their buddies that were running the show to start with so that they get more money in their pockets. The Panama Papers show hundreds of billions of dollars in secret bank accounts all over the world, but particularly in the Caribbean, in banks that don't honor extradition treaties, so that even if someone got a financial conviction on somebody, They couldn't pull them out of the Cayman Islands or wherever because they don't honor extradition to Britain, and it's designed that way. Barbados has some interesting banking laws. Let's just say they were founded by a bunch of English bankers. They knew what they were doing back in the day when the East India Trade Company was the original robber baron, globalist power. They had their own private army, navy, and marines, and it was cross funded. It was a public private venture between the crown, the parliament, the Royal Navy, and a company started in London, subsidized by Lloyd's of London Insurance Company. They got kickbacks from the insurance, and this was in 1660 AD. There's nothing new under the sun, boys and girls. This is how the world is. If you want to operate in freedom, you need to make sure that other people aren't stealing your freedom right out of your throat because you don't have any food to eat or any water to drink or any air to breathe. Some of these people say that water is not a human right. You think so? We're made of 80% water. I think maybe we're entitled to some. Yeah, water, air, food. These are things that are supposed to be available to human beings. They're not in our Constitution because we thought that was a given a couple hundred years ago. There's another thing. Founding fathers were pretty great. I'm trying not to cuss too much in this. Pretty great fellas and all. The Tea Party wasn't just about tea. Now it was, and it wasn't just about taxes. They knew full well when they got into power they were going to levy taxes too. All right. They just wanted to be in charge of who got what taxes and where it went. They didn't want to get everything taken away from them. They wanted to be able to squirrel something away. And also the East India Trade Company that had the tea in the Boston Harbor didn't just have tea in that harbor. They had tea in every harbor up and down the East Coast. It was a coordinated attack. This was launching the war. Okay. And what do you need when you want launch war? Well, tea's nice, but the secondary product that the East India Company transported around the world was saltpeter. Now, some of you know what that is, some of you don't. Saltpeter is one of the three ingredients to make gunpowder. You need charcoal, sulfur, and saltpeter. That's one of the three magical ingredients. And of the three, guess what? Which one's the hardest to get? The most rare of the three substances on the earth. Guess what? Carbon is around everywhere. That's what charcoal is. You can make charcoal out of anything that's organic. You can heat it up in a low oxygen environment, make charcoal. You make charcoal out of this chunk of wood. You make charcoal out of my shirt. You can make charcoal out of the hair that grows out of my face. What you can't make is saltpeter. So you have to get it from a source like bat guano, and none of them are pleasant, let me tell you. It's fairly easy to make once you get the source for it, but getting to the source is the problem. The conquistadors roped down in the 1600s the Spanish because they weren't getting any saltpeter from the English, let me tell you. They had to climb ropes down into active volcanoes, go in these sulfur chutes, dig out sulfur and saltpeter. We're talking, they didn't have rappelling equipment, right? They had hemp ropes and leather pads that they were strapped to. And they're in this hell on earth environment digging out saltpeter out of the side of a volcano in the caldera. Like, some of them didn't make it out alive because of the noxious fumes and deadly gases. And that's what they had to do to get saltpeter and sulfur. They put out expeditions into caves for bat guano, and they could make saltpeter or nitrates, which is what saltpeter is. It's a specific form of nitrate. You can make nitrate out of bat guano or bat crap. That's not pleasant work, but it's necessary for war when everything's powered with black powder. If you're going to subjugate the masses, these American Indians, these natives, these First Nation peoples, well, if you're going to kill Montezuma with a gun, you're going to need some gunpowder. So, the East India Company, guess what they had in those ships in addition to tea? See, the Boston Tea Party was a show. It was a Broadway production. You had a bunch of Masons dressed up like American Indians. The natives are restless. The natives went and dumped the tea into the harbor. Meanwhile, quietly, a bunch of longshoremen are unloading the saltpeter off the ships. Shh. This is part of the classified operation. It wasn't over tea and taxes. I mean, yeah, that's part of it. But the other part was we need to make sure we had powder and shot because we're taking on the biggest navy in the world. We're taking on the world's superpower, and their navy is top notch. Their army ain't too shabby neither. And to bridge the gap between the two, they had Marines. So 1775, we started our Navy, and navies have guns, like big guns, throw big cannonballs at the speed of sound. And for that, you need gunpowder. And for gunpowder, you need saltpeter. So, corruption. I'm not making any of this up now. You can fact check me on this one. The easiest place to go, I mean, not my favorite resource and all, but Wikipedia. Um, you can look up the East India Company on Wikipedia. Let me just go ahead and do that. I'll read you off a couple of points and give you some reference, some stuff you can look up. I think saltpeter is the most interesting bit. Saltpeter trade. It's section 5.2 or something. So, saltpeter trade, spelled SALT, like table salt, one word, saltpeter, SALTPETRE. That's the British spelling. Sir John Banks, a businessman from Kent, who negotiated an agreement between the king and the company being the East India Company. It's almost like the CIA, the company, the agency. He began his career in a syndicate arranging contracts for victualizing the Navy. In other words, providing sustenance for the Navy, food for the Navy, though it's not strictly food. It's not just the ship's biscuits, the hardtack. That's part of it, but it's all the supplies for the Navy: the gunpowder, the lead shot, the steel, bolts that hold the ships together, the bronze castings, everything for the Navy. So this is your military industrial complex right here. These are the guys that build the ships, make the guns, uh, forge the cannons out of steel and bronze. I mean, these are the guys making the jack that goes into the system to subjugate the masses around the world for colonization and imperialism, for the empire that the sun never sets on. This is Great Britain exuding its tentacles around the world from its little island. So John Banks is in charge of victualizing. That's victuals for Southerners. That's where the word victuals come from. Victuals, Victual, victual. So he's victualling the Navy. An interest he kept up for most of his life. This John Banks fella, Sir John Banks. He knew that Samuel Pepys and John Evelyn had amassed a substantial fortune from the Levant. That sound familiar? There's some fighting going on in the Levant right now in Indian tribes, or Indian trades rather, as in trade in the subcontinent of India. He became a director and later a governor of the East India Company. Imagine that. So he used to work for the Department of the Navy as a consul, and then, well, he initially worked for another procurement agency that did business with the Department of the Navy. The businessman procurement agency is left out of most of the history books. So anyway, he became a director and later governor of the East India Company in 1672. He arranged a contract which included a loan of 20,000 pounds. And in 1672, 20,000 pounds is like 50 million pounds, like $80 million worth of, gunpowder raw material. Now, this is what it's worth as a commodity, like, buying coal off the open market or buying grain. That's what it is as a commodity before you actually do anything to it to make it value added. That's what it's worth as a raw material, like corn futures. So 20,000 pounds and 30,000 pounds worth of saltpeter, what he loaned the government of Great Britain, of the United Kingdom, in 1672, because they were hurting for gunpowder. It's also known, saltpeter, as potassium nitrate. It's where we're talking about nitrates earlier. A particular type of nitrate, a primary ingredient in gunpowder. So for the king, at the price it shall sell by the candle, which is a phrase that means sold at auction, where bidding continues as long as an inch long candle remained burning, remained alight. Archaic, but yeah. Anyway, so there's a given time frame. In that 10 minutes, the bidding goes and goes and goes. And as soon as the light goes out, that's the last bid. And that's what it sells for. But it's an artificial, hard to time timing system. It's hard to game that timing. So people have to make sincere bids and not try and run the bid up on somebody else and then drop the bid and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, so outstanding debts were also agreed. That's great. Like, we'll just roll this debt that the government owes the East India Company into this one. We'll put them all together, and you'll just need to make a little balloon payment here later on down the road. I'd go on two more rabbit trails right here about English banking. But anyway, so outstanding debts were agreed, and the company permitted to export 250 tons of saltpeter. Again, in 1673, banks successfully negotiated another contract for 700 tons of saltpeter at 37,000 pounds price between the king and the company. So now they're negotiating, they're doing price fixing. So they're guaranteeing themselves a given price for a given weight of product. This is like knowing how much the Colombians are going to charge for the cocaine before it gets to the market, before it hits the Miami beach. This is that kind of price fixing. So high was the demand from armed forces that the authorities sometimes turned a blind eye on the untaxed sales of salt, otherwise known as gunpowder salts. One governor of the company was even reported as saying in 1864 that he would rather have the saltpeter made into gunpowder than have the cash in the till for the taxes on the salt. Like, they tax saltpeter pretty high, like 18%. They needed it so badly. The East India Trade Company had them over a barrel. They had a commodity that they needed. They had loaned it to them last year. They had paid them in full, still owed interest, still wanted more. They agreed on an inflated price before the year's production even began, and they still let them skate on not paying any taxes on it. This is how corrupt the system was. This was 1864. That was a long time ago. The American system is no less corrupt, and for all the same reasons. Because all this money is exchanged in hand, and we've been in a war for how long? 17, 18 years. We're still blowing stuff up in Afghanistan and all over, all over there in Uncle Sam's sandbox there in the Middle East. It's still bad. Still have operatives in harm's way. We're still losing all these lives that were born in America. And for what? I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not going to get into all the politics of it, but a lot of people are making a lot of money still off of killing people. That's all I'm saying. And this is where we get back to the martial arts. The true martial art is these guys are sitting in $10,000 suits, clean and warm in the middle of winter, and clean and cool in the middle of summer. While there's some grunt 12,000 feet in Afghanistan freezing his testicles off in the edge of a cave trying not to die in the middle of January in the freezing cold at altitude where it's hard to breathe. He's been out there for a week on his own. He's out of rations. He's eating roots that he's clawing out of the cliff with the butt of his rifle and whatever water he can melt from the glacier like conditions around him. And that guy, he's the guy who's doing the martial arts for real in the real world, but the guys calling the shots in their $10,000 suits are in nice, warm, cozy buildings sipping cocoa and whiskey by the fire. They're the real martial artists because they're not lifting a finger and they're killing hundreds and thousands of people every day over the phone, remote control with drones. And the drones are us. They push our buttons and then we go and blow shit up. That's a martial art. We need to get back into that to where we're the ones controlling, the e pluribus unum out of many one and make that one strong, but not a superpower that annihilates villages and blows up a whole wedding party because Uncle Timmy sold some stuff to pay for his grain. He sold his old family shotgun so he could buy some wheat to feed his starving baby mama. Yeah, we go blow up a whole wedding party 3 years later because he sold a shotgun to Al Qaeda. It was worth $20 a grain, and we kill this guy at his niece's wedding, and his niece and his nephew to be with a drone. Great job, fellas, making the world safer for democracy. I'm sure that flower girl that you blew all to hell was going to grow up to be a real threat there, Bubba. You feel better, Dick? I'm just saying, you agree or not, whatever. Yeah, there are people around the world that deserve to die, no doubt. Enemies of us, enemies of humanity, period. The thing is, there's no us and them. They're people too, all right? The more we hate on each other, the less the politicians and the warmongers and the industrialists have to spend spilling blood. If we spill each other's blood for them, that's less money they have to spend on bullets and nerve gas and pesticides. You worry about mercury in a vaccine for your kid. That's not the problem. You're eating organophosphates and mercury in your Wheaties from ConAgra. Monsanto has got its tentacles in 80 different businesses around the United States, let alone around the world. They make their own laws now. Like there are laws about how you can't say certain things about Monsanto because they've got the lawyers and the congressmen and senators so deep in their pockets, they have to open their pockets up for you to hear the senators talk. They make their own patents on chemicals that are found in nature. How is that possible? Like, are you telling me I can patent CO2? I can put a patent on sugar? I mean, where does this end? You're telling me I can put a patent on a chemical that's good forever and nobody can ever do any experimenting with it in a lab unless they pay me a fee for every day that they use that chemical? OMG. They're making their own form of government. And now we find out the science that Roundup has been making people's livers implode and giving them non Hodgkin's lymphoma. Every spot of sweat in your body is sprouting a tumor. That interstitial fluid called lymph, every lymph node you have in your body, every sweat gland is a potential tumor site when you play around with Roundup. Yeah, cowboy, belly on up to the bar here and throw out some Roundup on them weeds. It'll make life easier. Have yourself a whiskey and a cold beer. It's on us. We're Monsanto. We're your friend. We're going to make farming easy. You don't have to plow. You can just go through and kill all the weeds and every living stick of grass and stubble on the ground. You don't have to till it over. You can just use grain drills to pop the seed in the ground after you kill everything. We're we're affiliated with the same makers at Agent Orange, VX, Sarah, and Taboo. None of them had anything on us. We make an herbicide that makes some pesticides and nerve agents look like talcum powder. I mean, we got this jack, man. We can burn these weeds out like a blowtorch. Don't worry if you get a little bit of this on your clothes. It's fine. You can drink it. It won't kill you right away. Your liver will rot out. Your blood vessels will explode blood and tumors out your armpits. Your neck will swell up to where you look like a Brahma bull about to explode from lymphatic tumors. It'll be fine. We'll laugh all the way to the bank. From the makers of Agent Orange, brought to you by Monsanto. Allegedly. So if I get if I get disappeared, you'll know why. Dude, I have an unbelievably efficient pesticide that I have in a Windex squirt bottle. It kills aphids, it kills all kinds of stuff. It kills some young plants. You catch certain kind of weeds early on, and you can get some of the white root exposed that hasn't been hit by UV light yet. So I have this mixture, and it's easy and cheap to make. It's about 1/4 soybean oil, 1/4 uh, the liquid part of it, 1/4 dishwashing detergent, and the balance is water. Not real complicated. For every pint of that fluid, you add in about a tablespoon of prepared mustard, like French's mustard. Remember mustard gas, nerve agent? Okay, so this is a very mild form of that same kind of idea. And red pepper flakes of your choosing. And be They can be jalapenos, or they can be pickled or dried. They can be cayenne peppers, or they can be the red pepper flakes like you put on pizza. You put about 2 tablespoons of that in the solution. Just let it sit at room temperature, then run that through a cheesecloth to get all the flakes out. Put that in a spray bottle. There's not an aphid, an ant, anything that'll survive that for direct contact tent. And then there's transfer that will also take them out. The soap and the oil gets in their carapace, and those agents, which are very diluted, by the way, of the mustard and the capsaicin and the hot peppers, just irritate them to death, and they pretty much commit suicide. They run around headlong until they run out of energy. Like they can't eat. It attacks their central nervous system, and they go bonkers, and they're done. Like they have the equivalent of a heart attack. It's over. They have respiratory arrest and a heart attack, and it's done like under a minute, often in a couple of seconds. You can see them walking along on the leaf and fall over, and then they fall off the leaf and onto the soil. And all that naturally rots back into compost that's good for the soil. You're adding fat content, phosphates from the dishwashing liquid. So you've got a source of phosphates that feed your plants, not to mention the dead carcasses of those insects that you just killed. So they're feeding the plants. You've got a good source of fungi in the soil, like, well, pick your poison, but uh, 3 or 4 different varieties of mycorrhiza fungi with huge mycelium mats in the soil, and also get you a nice blend of oyster mushroom and turkey tail mushrooms. It will break down that fat, turn those oils into carbohydrates to feed your plant in a hurry. Good stuff. You'll have a nice little balanced ecosystem, and the plants will be good and healthy. Any insect damage you have, like you don't have to use the pesticide every day, not even close. Like after it rains, the plants dry out a little bit after a rain. Spray them with that. Even when it gets washed off in the next rain, it's still the effectiveness continues for a little while. If you'll knock out a couple of generations of those insects, but you don't want to kill every insect all the way down to nothing, because like 98% of the insects in your garden are beneficial. You know, they don't do damage to the garden, they actually help. It's only a few little bad actors, some of the slugs and some of the boring weevils and beetles, some of the worms, some of them they eat a little bit, but their contributions are much bigger than their consumption. So, you know, even using any pesticide of any variety is debatable. Like you know, use it sparingly and you'll do just great. But yeah, I mean, definitely use a natural pesticide with that's the natural oil, not a mineral oil from petroleum. I mean, that's not terrible in the grand scheme of things, but you're better off with a soybean oil, corn oil, uh, canola oil, that sort of thing. There's no excuse for using organophosphate, high level toxins that bioaccumulate in every organism on the planet. Like our bodies, the bodies of insects, the bodies of other mammals, other primates, fishes, like they can't even phosphate. They can't process these organic phosphates out of their system. They cause chromosomal damage. That's what chromosome damage is. What the Gulf War syndrome is all about. Here again, back to war, martial law. We blew up a lot of stores of illegal anti uh, convention chemical weapons that we had given Saddam Hussein back in the Who knows? We've given that country anyway back in the 70s, 80s, and right up until the war started. The first Gulf War, 90, what was it, 91? And that screwed up everybody. That we had an aerial mist over a decent chunk of the whole country and part of Kuwait. We blew up these chemical weapons, these secret missions, and all these Gulf War soldiers are coming back, sailors and Marines, and their chromosomes are messed up, and their gametes, the uh, you know the DNA in their gonads is messed up. So they have children with horrible birth defects from these organophosphate nerve gas agents, pesticides on steroids. All a nerve agent is. So, yeah, worry a little bit about mercury in your vaccine, but worry a lot more about the aerial spraying of pesticides, herbicides, the dispersion of inorganic radioactive material from fracking into our water supply. We're dumping radium and radon at massive, unprecedented rates into underground water supplies as we're busting apart these caverns under immense pressure. We're injecting salt water and benzene, and we're busting up these huge veins of radium and uranium rock. And we know they're there. I mean, these guys, we lower down these sensors that send out a big X-ray, and that the veins of uranium and radium and palladium and iridium and cobalt, they light up like the 4th of July and a Christmas tree all at once. And the pictures come back, and it's just fireworks. They know they're down there. They're not going to stop production. They're not going to be the guy that says, "Oh, stop the drilling." No, no, no. They just go ahead and pump that high pressure water with God only knows what solvents are in there. We know for sure there's benzene because we chemically tested some of the stuff. Third party testing from some so called environmental wackos that rode around in canoes taking water and air samples. That's how you know the truth. You get a scientist that hasn't been bought off by any American politician. We import one out of Finland to look at our water at our local water plant, figure out that there's radium, radon, iridium, cobalt, uranium 235, 238, 237 in the water that we're drinking. It's coming out after it's been processed by the water plant. Yeah, in case you don't know it, radon has a half life of 1,500 years. That's not the worst. The worst is the stuff that has a half life of like 8 seconds. That stuff will fry you from the inside out. Because in 8 seconds, it converts all that mass into energy. E equals mc squared. It goes to half of that mass, half life. Half of it's gone in 8 seconds. Like those bull riding champions, stay on a bull for 8 seconds. In 8 seconds, some micro milligram, picogram of some tiny minuscule amount of mass has been turned into radioactive gamma rays inside your belly from where you drank the water. So, yeah, we've got an environmental problem in this world, Al Gore, but it's not from the cell phones blasting the bees. It's your cronies in the military industrial complex. That's what I'm saying. And that's nothing new. That's been going on since at least 1640 in English speaking countries. And it goes well past that in other countries. It predates the English language. This kind of corruption was going on under the Romans speaking Latin, and the Greek speaking, well, Greek, and under the Egyptians writing those funny picture words. This stuff's been going on. They probably burnt the Library of Alexander to get rid of the evidence. It wasn't foreign invaders. It wasn't those crazy Arabs that burnt the, the Library of Alexander. It was probably a bunch of Greek senators that didn't want the evidence of their paybacks on the scrolls hidden in the library in some special vault. That's probably how the Library of Alexander got burnt. They sent in a squad of spooks to burn that baby down. You want a conspiracy theory, Eddie Bravo? Chew on that one for a while. Put that one in a headlock and roll it around. But no, seriously, I mean, corruption is not new, but we have brought it to an industrial, efficient level because we invented a new kind of evil that can be perpetrated. We figure out a way to avoid taxes. That's one of the ways you become and stay rich and keep your family rich for many generations. Sometimes you're not able to pass everything on tax free to your kids. Sometimes you don't have kids. Sometimes you want to send it on tax free to the neighbor's kid that you like a whole lot. So that's how corporations come into being. So we have these big companies that live forever, and you have somebody X, Y, and Z on the board, and X doesn't have any children, or at least doesn't have any children where he or she is a viable replacement on the board of directors for the next generation. So you just let the sharks rise to the surface, and whoever's on the board gets the booty prize. So you lay all that wealth into the corporation, into their assets, protected under walls of lawyers and bricks and mortar and gold, hidden assets in foreign banks that don't do extradition in the Caribbean, the Cayman Islands, and French Indochina, and God only knows. I mean, I'm sure that we've been to the moon. There's probably a secret bank on the moon hiding money from somewhere, some laundering outfit from some politician and some industrialist. I bet you there's a vault somewhere saying do not open until 2050. There's a note inside saying, yeah, we did it. We made a boatload of money on it. We killed some people that we didn't like anyway. That's the kind of corruption that's been going on. Humanity, government, that's not a side effect of government. That's government's job. You just hope the corruption lands in your favor. When people enough people get together and try to fix things, there's going to be some shortcuts that get taken because there's a lot of people and there's only so many hours in the day. You got a job to do. There's only so much you can do in the day, so you need to recruit people to do something for you. Well, how are you going to do that? Well, you need to curry favor. So you're going to buy them their favorite cigar and, you know, make sure they have their favorite little party favor, female, male, somewhere in between, or all the above. Make sure they got their favorite booze, their drug of choice, and in plenty supply. You want to make sure they're backed up at the bar and they got somebody taking care of them because they're in charge of your payday. They're going to make your job easier. That's how corruption happens. It's not that these people are in their core completely evil human beings. At least they don't start out that way. They just have an impossible task. They've got to push this giant boulder up the hill every day. Well, how do you do that? Well, if you're the Rock, I mean, Dwayne Johnson, the Rock, well, you can just push the boulder because you're that badass. You just push the boulder up the hill, stand up on the top, and go, it's good morning. Doing all right today. Can you smell the rocket's contact? Like you can do that before lunch. But unless you're like, Uberman, Superman, powerful Samoan super wrestler, 7 foot tall, made of triple muscle layers on your forehead, you're not going to be able to push that rock all by yourself up the hill. So you're going to have to recruit some help and you're going to have to pay them somehow. That's where it gets interesting. That's where it gets cross contaminated with other people's ideas and goals. Look, I don't want to build a bridge over that creek, but if I don't build that bridge over that creek, My farmers don't get their grain prices subsidized for their seed money next winter, and we might all starve. I don't want to build a bridge over this creek in backwoods, middle of nowhere, Holler, West Virginia, but that's the cheapest $18,000 I'm going to spend this month because we need to be able to buy seed to feed the country next year, grow the crops, make sure our children don't starve. Because there aren't many people that know how to grow it, by the way. We need a few experts. Everybody says, oh, these greedy farmers. Like, you know what? It's hard work and it's not easy. There's a lot of doing to figure out on how to get it done and get it done right. You're like, all you gotta do is plant a seed in the field. Yeah, well, every seed you plant in the field, you're making a bet against God, nature, every crow, snake, and frog, and wild boar, and stray cow and goat on the planet. Like you're planting a plant and you want it to live for half a year unmolested by animals in Mother Nature, by insects, and you hope the natural world just provides enough water, sunlight, and nutrients so that this plant provides some food at the end of the year, and at harvest time that you don't have some tornado come through and mash it all up into sawdust, turn everything into worthless nothing, and you spend tens of thousands of dollars in the off season making payments on your equipment that you can't use because the ground's frozen solid and there's 12 feet of snow on top of the frozen ground. You couldn't move that tractor with a helicopter and on a bet. You're still making payments on it. You don't have any income coming in at all. You still have to make a $2,800 payment on a tractor that's sitting in a barn collecting rust. You have to winterproof it to make sure that it doesn't freeze over and bust the block and turn into a worthless $88,000 couch over the wintertime. Like you have to spend money just for the privilege to spend more money on it. And then come spring, you dump tens of thousands of dollars into tractors like it and 15 more others, and you go hire every swinging dick in the county to plow fields for you in a predetermined pattern and timing so that you can time the rain and the soil temperature to give you maximum germination on your seeds because you're trying to grow a plant, and this plant has a few natural defenses, but we've bred out a lot of those because those same natural defenses don't taste good. They're bitter. We're making sweet corn here because we like the taste of it. So we've bred out a lot of the tannins and natural defenses, man. We make this thing taste like candy. So we've on purpose gotten rid of a bunch of its natural defenses. So it tastes like candy to the deer too. So when it's that tall, it's like lollipop, lollipop. Those little baby fawns in the springtime are going down each row. Like, oh, it was mighty nice of you to put everything in the line here. So I just go down the row and go, they can eat 8,000 corn sprouts in an hour. That's like eight a second. They go, if you've ever seen a deer take out like 4 inch tall corn sprouts in a field, it's a machine. There are millions of those deer. I think I swallowed a bug when I was making that sound, that gulp sound. Deer sucking up corn sprouts. So that's the bet you make as a farmer. They're not greedy. They're just hoping that, half their crop survives halfway through the season. And then you can have everything going beautiful. And the corn is, 8 feet tall. And oh my God, it's going to be a great year. And then a drought sets in and it's 106 degrees in Nebraska and it hasn't rained for 5 weeks. And there goes everything. We're done. There's no turning back. Once it gets that dry and that hot, it's tender. And that it's nothing but a field full of kindling now. There's no life left in it. Not a drop of rain, no water coming up. So what do? Well, you dig a well and you water the plants. So that's more expense. That's more stress on the environment. They get choices removed from them day after day after day. A lot of these folks have, bachelor's degree and masters and PhDs in all sorts of agricultural science, biology, botany, you name it. Just unbelievable amounts of knowledge that goes into this. A lot of people that don't know a farmer, they think he's some dumb hick from the sticks. You find out this guy's a bona fide scientist with multiple degrees under his belt. You know, he can read Latin. Just because he's in Nebraska or Oklahoma doesn't mean he doesn't have an education. Iowa, I mean, they read Latin there too. He studied poetry as well. He also studied the genome of cereal grains and root vegetables, the life cycle of a boll weevil. That's a parasite that lives in cotton plants, by the way. It's one of the most heavily pesticided insects. When God loves beetles. Well, boll weevil is just a kind of a subspecies of the beetle clan, and they eat up cotton balls from the inside out as they're growing within the plant. Cotton's grown from the plant. Some of you people don't know that. Think it comes from Peter Cottontail. No, it's not a fur product. It's grown from a plant. Heard of Egyptian cotton? Yeah. Well, anyway, I digress. So they're just out there fighting a battle, and they have these scientists that are supposed to be bona fide, telling them that this product is safe. And now, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is known worldwide as farmer's cancer. It's like the worst kept secret in the medical community. Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is the organophosphate Monsanto farmer's cancer. And that's been known for over a decade and a half. They just weren't allowed to publicize it because Monsanto's got a stranglehold on the press, on the Congress, on the Senate, on the Parliament in the UK, on the European Union, on the Australian Parliament. They're everywhere. There are places in Papua New Guinea that have these giant Monsanto signs. Roundup. That's what I'm talking about. This is where we are in the world. So, yeah, we're killing some bees. But the good news is we've come around a long way. We have huge zones where it's illegal to spray any pesticide or herbicide, where you can get thrown in jail today if you fly over the area without your nozzles on from a crop duster. If you fly a crop duster through certain areas, you're required by law to have a GPS on them now. So if you fly this crop duster through a certain area, even if your tanks are empty, you don't have any chemical on you. If you fly that crop duster through a certain airspace, you'll get a $10,000 fine. And if you're a smooth talker, maybe you won't go to jail when you land the plane. But we've got some laws in place to help us out. So we're not killing bees. They're doing well now. Like the bee apocalypse is not coming. Not for a while, not for these reasons anyway. Uh, Here's one of the articles from what's up with that.com 2016, like February 17th, titled Call Off the Bee Apocalypse, U.S. honeybee colonies hit a 20-year high. I won't read the entire article, but I'll hit a couple of Highlights. Trouble all began in 2006 or so when beekeepers first began noticing mysterious die offs. That wasn't the first of it. That's just the first that got international attention. We have more bees now than we've had in a long time. Arguably, the worldwide bee population is the largest it's ever been in the history since men and women, since humans, modern, atomic, anatomically modern humans have been living on the planet. So bees are doing all right. Now it's not perfect. Could we improve? Absolutely. We cannot throw them into cesspools, and we can encourage local small businesses to have bees on their property. All sorts of charitable ideas. So be careful. Be careful with your martial arts. Someday your life might depend on it. Be careful what you put at the feet of the bees because we're killing the bees, but we need to be careful about what kind of science we lay on them and say the cause is. We need to look at the actual facts, in and out, all of the facts. Make pie charts about it, figure out who's doing what to who and who's getting paid for it and who's getting paid under the table and behind the curtain, who's running the show. All I'm saying, just pay attention. I'm not saying it's anybody's fault. It's just what happens with human beings. We're complicated. There's no us and them. It's all us. We're just all trying to survive here. We just have a few bad actors we need to police a little better from amongst our midst. So, love you all. Be good. Be sweet to one another. All right? We'll get back at you in a few more days. Take care. This is Chris Neely, the GOAT, the master of disaster, signing off. Y'all have a great evening. Bye bye.